Roll up, roll up. See the future stars of rock. Watch 3 live bands, magic tricks, guitar masterclasses. Be entertained by card shufflers, chord shufflers, and note makers. In the awesome surroundings of the Weald of Kent and at the big top of this kingdom, your chance to be entertained or even win a BC-rich guitar. On the 12th of March, starting at 3:30 through to 7:30 at the wonderful Kingdom near Penshurst, we will be doing a fundraising event for Ikaro Music to enable young people to learn to play the guitar and write songs. Be sure to be there. Numbers are limited. Follow the link in the show notes on the Eventbrite.
So today I'm going to be talking to Alex Tilmans. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Vic. Happy to be with you today.
That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. So look, traditional first question, Alex, what do you do?
So I started a company that creates marketing content out of art.
Right.
In a nutshell. And then we can elaborate on that, obviously.
Yes, yeah. So what sort of stuff is it that you do, particularly with this?
So we started with street art primarily, and just because painting in public attracts conversation. It started from that. And by painting in public, if it attracts conversation, well, according to the topic you paint, people start talking about that topic. And suddenly it was from the get-go, we were like, okay, we don't want to paint anything negative that's going to impact the resident negatively. So let's paint optimistic stuff. And by painting optimistic topics, suddenly it sparked an optimistic conversation, and the residents were happy and they were chatting about it, and they were outside more often and getting to know their neighbors more often. And we're like, well, that's amazing. It creates a nice vibe in the neighborhood.
That's really interesting. It's sort of an unusual concept. So, because obviously, if people start painting things, in this country, people get a little bit, unless it's sort of done as a proper project. So, have you always been interested in art, particularly? Is that where you sort of come from, or is it?
Not at all. I was a financial manager for a very long time. So,
okay. That's a bit different. Okay.
Yeah. Had a financial background, studied in a business school. And but what triggered it is the fact that I started a craft brewery. And
okay. Oh, right. This is right. Yeah. Okay.
It's getting random, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. I like it.
So by creating a beer, by creating a recipe, creating a brand, creating a product, creating packaging, I was exposed to a lot of creatives. And beer is a very highly competitive market. So you need to be unique one way or another. I decided if you have a good beer, you drink it on a nice evening in an art gallery or in a theater. And that's what I want to do. So I stick within that creative sector and creative world, and artists help me, I help them. With beer, and that's how my knowledge comes from, or that's where it comes from. And talking with friends, I realized that street artists usually struggles to find work, paid work, especially like who pays you to paint a wall. And I was like, well, hang on a second. Well, here in South Africa, alcohol is sold in liquor shops. What if I start painting liquor shops? I mean, surely that's going to be unique. And that's how I started working with street artists.
That's a really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. Carry on.
Yeah, so it's a story that was totally unpredictable. And by working with those street artists, I met other people, and And there was a general consensus that street artists are not really recognized for their artistic value. They're called like graffiti artists, or they come from gangs, or they use drugs,
Yeah.
or there's all those
Yeah.
stigma and stereotypes. And one day my business partner now said, well, why don't we organize a festival for those street artists like that? And we call it very pompously Public Art Festival. Just thinking like everybody is an artist and everybody should be recognized as an artist. And I was like, well, you know what? Creating a festival for me is great because I'll sell beer in any case. So in my mind, I was like, great, I'm happy to work with the artist I'm already working with and do a festival like that. I'll sell beer. Best of both worlds. And we did that festival, which was very successful. And we had a lot more artists that we should have had to handle. It was just 40 artists painting 40 walls on the first festival. It was a logistical nightmare. But what came out of it was happy residents and some job offers. Oh, we have a hospital where the children room needs to be repainted because it's dull and white or gray. And oh, we have a hotel lobby. Oh, we have a parking lot. And we were like, well, we were not ready for that. And we're like, well, hang on. We created basically an opportunity now for street artists. And that's how the journey started. So creating a platform for street artists to get jobs.
It's really interesting because it's almost like you've reassigned, as you said, before people would have been thinking them as graffiti artists and, they're sort of troublemakers and all the rest of it, really. It's a bit of a social nuisance. And you've sort of taken that idea and turned it on its head, really, haven't you?
Yeah, totally. And yeah, totally turn it on its head and calling every artist an artist without stereotypes on background or whatever. And it has helped a lot for them.
That's really interesting. Because, I mentioned before about Bruno that's how I've sort of got to know about you. But there's sort of an interesting thing with the area that I come from, with sort of music, because that was definitely a thing that happened. Certainly when I was first started playing and teaching, whereas I was dealing with a lot of classical players, and I sort of had a foot in both camps because I played a bit of classical guitar, but it's more in the world of teaching. But there was an extraordinary amount of snobbery attached to that, where people who were classical players would look down on anybody who was a contemporary, played electric guitar or bass or drums or whatever. But now it's sort of completely changed. But I can see in that what you're saying about, calling everybody's an artist instead of it being, designating them as something different. I can see that sort of thing where people's perception of something, even within their own genre, is really quite interesting. That is something that we sort of do. It's almost like, I don't know whether people feel threatened somehow by something they don't understand, because I certainly felt that with contemporary music, and maybe there's something in that about street art.
What helped, I can tell you what helped. What helped from the first festival is to get always one or two gallery of fine art artists that you can refer as your classical musicians.
Yes.
And make them paint on the wall.
Yes.
Obviously, they want to do a good job because they have that fine gallery type attitude and perfection that you need to have for gallery artwork, usually, not always, but usually. And so they would definitely try to do the best job they can on a wall. And for the public to understand, oh, this guy is also painting a wall. Oh, it must be public art.
Yes.
So suddenly we're not speaking about graffiti.
Exactly.
The stereotypes are gone. And it was also a way to convince the city. I mean, painting in a city center, obviously you have to show that you can do it and that you will deliver something that is palatable.
Yeah.
So there was that element, the deliberate element of taking artists, obviously some graffiti artists. We have had people doing illustration that came to paint for us. We had fine art artists. So artists from different backgrounds to actually participate.
That's interesting. It's fascinating. Yeah. There was something in that, isn't there, in the way people's perception. And then in a way you've broken a wall down. Well, it's a bit of a bad pun, but you know what I mean? It's
a taboo.
Yeah, it is a taboo. Yeah, actually it is a taboo, isn't it? And almost like, because this idea that art needs to be in a special place, like in a gallery. Whereas
then for me we can discuss
no, I know, but
the
definition
definition of art
yeah,
and
yeah,
the definition
yeah.
of music. For me, art is something that we should talk about. It's something that should inspire a conversation, such as music. I mean, if I hear something good or bad, or something that inspires me, I'll say, oh, this music inspires me, or this music reminds me, or this culture tells me that. And for me, as soon as we consider art as a tool of communication or a medium of communication, then it changes the perspective. We can start talking about any type of art.
Yes. I agree with you.
It's not something we lock in and we preserve,
Yeah, but I think that's the sort of thing that happens with people's attitude towards something. It becomes. I've even seen it, interestingly, in the way that music is taught, right? And this must be true with art, actually, where obviously when I started off, you work things out off of recording, off a record, by slowing a record down and then working out what was being played. Because you couldn't find the books, they didn't exist. So you had to work it out for yourself, which meant, of course, because you were slowing a record down, sometimes you couldn't hear a particular note because somebody hit a crash cymbal or whatever, So you had to guess. And just sometimes you just couldn't work it out at all, and it meant, it was frustrating because you wanted to get it like the original, right? But of course you couldn't. So that meant that you inadvertently created your own style because you had to make a lot of guesses based on what you heard, which meant that obviously the people who played like that and learned like that had a better ear and could make creative decisions. They weren't just being told what to do. In fact, they weren't being told at all. And I've seen that change completely. So now we're ending up with people learning pieces of music, contemporary music, that as if it's a piece of classical music, that everything has to be played note for note. Now, there has to be something. Well, that's obviously happened with art, because there must have been a certain amount of teaching of technique. But teaching of technique's not the same, is it, as just copying a form? You know what I mean? So when you get, street art, I would say, may sort of be very much like sort of root style music that will appear, punk or something like that. That sort of comes in from another angle. That
I do think, like you said, I think there are two types of artists. There are what we call internally here the photocopiers.
Yes.
The one that do not for note, and
yes.
and the one that have a style, a uniqueness, a dedicated passion, and they will say, no, I'm not going to do a commercial sign because we need to comply with whatever branding. I have my style and it's going to be what I'm going to perform. You like it or not, that's not my problem. And it's two very different sort of art. One is commercial. because it needs to please a client. The other one is the artist communicating what him or herself wants to say. Not if it pleases or not, that's a different debate. So that for us, we put them into two categories like that.
Yes. But there seems to be a natural desire to want to make something formulaic somehow over time, which is odd. Maybe, I don't know. It's just interesting. So going back to because you mentioned very briefly that you're involved in finance. So, I mean, let's go back to, sort of how you got involved in that just generally. I mean, what was sort of growing up? Did you grow up in Africa, or did you?
No, I grew up in Belgium, in the countryside, in the forest, exactly between Brussels and Luxembourg, surrounded by hills and trees. No, I always wanted to be an architect, to be honest. I did fail my exam because in Belgium you have an entry exam when you want to apply for architecture at university.
Okay.
And I was like, well, let's find something a bit more practical. And then because there was a lot of abstract mathematics for architecture. And the next thing that was a lot more practical was money. And everybody told me, oh, no, that's a lot more complicated. You're going to fail. And I was like, no, I'm not going to fail twice. So that's what I studied. I have to say that it taught me a lot. And especially getting into, so if we now merge being a financial manager, which is basically taking care of accounts, budgets, purchase, human resources, legal. That is something that is often missing in the art world.
Yes. This is what I'm interested in. This is why I was trying to lure you into that territory. But yeah, absolutely. So carry on, because this is good. Yeah.
So for me, it's very natural to set up a business and look if your books are straight or not. That's very quick. For me, it's a flip of a second. But I realized that for a lot of other people, it's very difficult. And so I love that combination of the two. And for me, creating Baz-Art, which is half an NGO and half a commercial entity, if you want, we can touch on that later, was about how to create a sustainable business with a positive impact. Because I know I cannot rely on grants and funding.
No.
That's not sustainable. That comes and goes. But what I can do is provide a good service that people will pay for. And again, it took me a while to understand that and translate that in the art sector, because most often we consider art as an entertainment, something that we'll buy it because we just like it.
Yes.
But how do we understand art as a business? Because, well, artists need to make a living. That's already a business in itself. Yes, there are legislation. Well, it involves transaction. And how to make that self-sustainable so that artists don't rely on donation. I do think music is far more advanced than visual art. That's what I came to realize. Music has understood the intricacies of creativity and business. Where I find visual art and maybe performing art is probably the one that still needs to learn the most on how to create self-sustainable performing art industry.
It's a very interesting thing, because it's almost like there's certain areas of this that haven't really been fully explored somehow. There was a book by Jacques Attali, who was, I think, I don't know if he was Belgian or French, actually. I think he was French. But it was called Noise. And he was a musician, but he was also an economist. And he sort of talks about, he was talking about the rise of CDs. This is before they really made the impact. And he was saying that, you know, people will make a lot of money out of this, and then all of a sudden it will collapse because of the technology. There'll be an oversupply of music because people will easily be able to produce music. And of course, it was absolutely spot on. And then he sort of maintained that the way forward for artists was to, you know, musicians obviously in this instance, was to look at where the scarcity was. He said, and obviously, there's always going to be a scarcity in live performance because, you know, you might not be together as a band next year or whatever, you know. And it's interesting that because I think what happens is looking at art and obviously music as well, it's about what's it do for you? And I think that's something that's it's actually quite difficult for artists to successfully explain it. It's just not, like you said, art is just something, well, you like that, you buy it because you like it.
I don't believe in that. I think
no, but
you not only you buy it because you like it. I think that's the easy answer. That's the easy thing. Like art is just you like it and you buy it.
Yes, but I think what needs to be done is the actual impact that art has, and being able to express that in such a way that people realise that they need it. It needs to be there. And I think that's something that's actually quite difficult for a lot of people too.
I strongly believe you buy art because you can talk about it or tell a story about it.
Yes.
You can say, look at that piece.
Yes.
It's a little kid. I met him. He was the king of the street. He has a blue skateboard, and his mom was so lovely because she makes great tart, and then you can talk about it, and that's what is entertaining about art, and I believe same in music, because of the lyrics or because the rhythm reminds you of something or a party of a few years ago. Yeah, I believe that's why people enjoy art, not because they can buy it.
I think that's absolutely right. But what I was saying is I don't think that people explain that very well.
No,
I think that's what it is. And
yeah,
and you obviously have got a good understanding of how business works and why people often want a solution to a problem, don't they? That's but if you got the answer to somebody's problem, you got a business basically. Because I've noticed, particularly, obviously I can only speak for being here in the UK, but there is a definite feel of things have changed musically here. There aren't so many venues, and it goes like this every now and again. You know, it's just literally just might be cyclic. But obviously, off the back end of COVID, lots of venues stopped. And they were often the type of venues you didn't expect would shut down. But I also think that, you know, musicians that are coming into it now, and this might be true with art, again, you know, they need to be thinking in a slightly different paradigm, which is, again, I think what you're doing with the street art is a very similar sort of thing. I don't quite know what the answer is to this at the moment because I'm still toying with it. Maybe, you know, maybe something in what you've done.
I don't have the answer for music neither, but I can tell you my thoughts on street art and public art.
Yes.
So about 10 minutes ago, I said we started with street art, and the reason why I say we started is that we realized 7 years later that we are actually using more than one form of art when we paint a wall. And we didn't realize it on year 1, year 2, and year 3, but by year 4, we realized that, well, hang on. Yes, there's the artist painting the wall, but sometimes there's an illustrator that works before him, or some kind of creative collective briefing to imagine what that artwork looked like. On the day, there's also a photographer and a videographer to capture the moment that also have their own brief and their own subject or topic to take out of that little film or photography they're taking. There's also someone that writes. We can appeal to literature in a way, someone that can tell the story of the artwork and the art piece. And so after a couple of years, we realized, well, hang on, it's not one or two artists or one or two creatives, let's call them creatives, that we work with, but it's actually a group of people. And they all have their own mission, but they all need to work together for that wall to speak. That wall is not going to speak by itself. If you just paint a wall, it's not going to speak. And when we realized that, we were like, well, hang on, what limits us to now include music? What limits us to include a digital form of the mural? What limits us to include poetry? And that's it took us a good year to mature. And on the 1st of March, 2023, is going to be our next festival, International Public Art Festival. And yes, there will be music, there will be installations, there will be sculptures. And the goal is to really integrate different forms of art. And I think that element of collaboration will create novelty in the public scene.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, that's one of the things when I've been talking to people about what to do, and also for me, because I'm looking at things and thinking, well, actually going out and gigging is not really the thing I'm sort of feel drawn to at the moment. But I've just finished a book, and to me, using music with that every time you do like a book launch, or you're at some sort of literary festival or something like that, the last thing you expect is somebody playing guitar, as part of the thing. And I was thinking that, like you're saying, integrating different art forms and getting out that sort of paradigm that you've got, because it's very easy to do something in a particular way without actually realizing that you're limited by other thoughts about what happens. Like if you're doing the street art, it's just that. But as soon as you're saying, you realize, well, got people who do poetry, or you get somebody who's videoing this, something else is happening. So yeah, I actually think that is probably the way forward of integrating lots of different forms of art together, instead of, sort of messing around with this. Some gigs that I'm organising at the moment. So
I think music and the film industry have had a very close collaboration for a very long time.
Yeah,
that has been a very close and necessary collaboration from the beginning of film.
Yes, right from the beginning. But again, you see, there's still an idea, isn't there, that if you're doing a film, it's going to have music with it. But for that to be in a little box. Whereas, of course, if you do that in such a way where you've got a band performing and there's a film showing, it's not to say that's not happened before, because obviously bands like Pink Floyd were doing stuff like this. But you still don't see that very often in a gig situation, not, in an ordinary local gig situation. You get people playing and that's it. You don't get people playing and then other things happening. Somebody, as I say, somebody with a film or just sort of art or something, just generally people dancing or anything like that. I mean, when the breakdancing thing was a big thing, God, what were we talking about? Early 80s. We had a couple of people that I was in a reggae band, and there were a couple of break dancers that we knew, and we used to put them on as a slot if we were playing a big gig. with a stage, they would come on and do something. And they weren't actually playing while they weren't doing the thing while we were playing. But even just putting that on seemed quite radical, because I haven't seen anybody else do that. But you don't see that very often. And it's not the norm to see people integrating different things together.
And I'm sure it sparked conversation. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, do you get any when you did that? I'm assuming everybody's pretty much in agreement, because it's one of those things that people sort of look back and go, "Oh yeah," once it's pointed out. But do you get any kickback from any of the artists themselves? Where it's like, you probably don't actually, but
no, not at all. Usually it's done with the artists.
Yeah.
Everything is done in a collaborative effort, and
but you are probably working with people who are quite left field anyway, aren't you? I would have thought. They see the world slightly, because they're coming at the world of art from.
I think maybe we have to put that in a South African context, where
yes,
again, I'll use economic terms with 40% unemployment.
Yeah.
Where you have a family to feed, and you might have been a graffiti artist when you were a teenager, but when you are 26 or 35 and it's kids, it's time to get a real job. And if you want to remain an artist, it's time to create a career.
Yeah.
And so many branch out into marketing, into digital animation. So there's those branching. I mean, but no, it comes from a job perspective to follow a passion. So it's not really left type. I think it's more bringing food.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about people, because sometimes people can get a bit precious about what they're doing, if you see what I mean.
Oh, we do have those. We do have those.
Yes, I'm sure you have.
But that's okay, because I mean, as a platform, if we get 50 different gigs, call them gigs or projects per year, there's one for everyone. I mean, I can tell you, some artists don't like kids. Well, we're not going to send them to paint a school. That would be the worst idea.
Yes.
Some are scared of heights. I mean, we're not going to send them up in the air if they're scared of heights. So it's all about understanding what is everybody's strengths and passion and will, and working it out harmoniously.
So your the company that you started, the beer company, is that still sort of part of this? What drives a lot of this?
It's stopped. It stopped. It still exists in Belgium. So I have former business partners in Belgium that have continued, but the South African side stopped right before COVID and lockdown.
Right.
As simply as, well, it was not making money, and need to bring food to the table.
Yeah.
Because it's highly competitive.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah. So, what are you doing with the projects now? So, what sort of things are you? So you said you got about 50 a year.
So a normal year would start in March. We organize a festival. We welcome between 20 to 30 artists, and we get to know them during 10 days. We challenge them. Obviously, we know their portfolio. We know what they've done. Half of them come from South Africa, the other half from the rest of the world. And we push boundaries a little bit so that we get really to understand what they like doing and don't like doing, and what is the message behind what they stand for. So that's 10 days. And after the festival, we promise all the local artists to find them jobs throughout the year.
No.
By that time, we know, as I said, who likes school kids and who doesn't, who's scared of heights or not, who likes to do commercial job and who prefers art for art, and not ready to deviate from their style. And then those jobs come from, I would say, 3 different sources. The first one is they're equal. Those 3 sources are actually very equal. One is commercial. A big brand wants us to paint a wall, a cooling tower, a billboard, and create a story around it. Number one. The other one is an NGO wants to raise awareness around an issue: water and hygiene, homelessness, COVID vaccination. It was a big one a few years ago. And then we use the artist as an ambassador to create or to communicate around that topic through artwork and public artwork. And the last one is government. And government should be around an issue sometimes, like COVID, or just beautifying a space, making it cleaner, making it fresher, making it more colorful, integrating a neighborhood together. So those would be the 3 main types of projects.
So do you have to sort of really go out and sort of find those sort of projects, or is it the actual, when you do the festivals, does it sort of sell it?
We have to do both. We get some projects naturally, just because it has been 7 years and people have seen what we've been doing and people have been talking about it. But we do also proactively go out. I also tend to believe that there are more street artists than projects. So we have to move outside South Africa. So which makes us work sometime in the UK, actually, 2 years ago.
Okay.
And hopefully in Switzerland this year. And more closer to home, we went to Nigeria or to Kenya for different projects. And yeah, so we're really looking out and helping those artists to reach a career beyond just national.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I mean, if you've got an artist who's doing something outside of the country as well, I mean, that's great for their sort of profile within a country, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So we were discussing that very recently, and we came up with that concept. So when I have to chat with artists about the business of art or how to create a business out of art, I used what I call the ladder of artists.
Right.
And as an artist, if you want to make a living, you have to climb that ladder. And there are different aspects that will help you climb quicker. And I know I'll get shouted at for that, but it's okay.
No, that's good.
No,
In fact,
not by
you
you.
You should say what those things are, because I think that.
No, but statistically, all over the world, bronze has attracted more value than wood. So if you're a sculptor, well, do a couple in bronze. It will attract a bigger price.
Yeah.
If you paint oil or acrylic, on average, oil has attracted a higher price. An artist that has got a degree, on average, fetches a higher price. An artist that has had a solo exhibition in his country, and especially if he has had a solo exhibition abroad, will fetch a higher price. So there's that ladder. And obviously being in international museum is probably the top summit. And not everyone should aspire for that. That's not what I'm saying. But it's good to know where you are. And it's good to know what boundaries can you push and compare with your peers. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And yeah, so that ladder of artists is for me a great way to explain that where I am and where can I go next. And I think every business does that.
I think it does. One of the things I've always sort of spoken to sort of the sort of musicians that I've taught or have advised is this thing of having like multiple sort of pillars about what you do. You know? So you're not just working on one aspect. You know, so from a musician's point of view, they can have their particular project they do because they love that, but then there's another project that's brings the money in. You know, they could be playing in a function band, or they could be doing some teaching, and then there's something else that they do. You know, they might be teaching guitar, but they might also be teaching another musical instrument. They may be, yeah. So the idea is to have that range of things, because what I've seen people do is they have this one thing, and they'll stick with that one thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But again, as you say, if they're trying to make a living, then there's the economic factors that come in, the financial factors, which musicians are really not good with, the ones that, you know, on the whole. And then occasionally you get a musician, and this must be true with artists, well, I know it's true with artists, who are brilliant, who just get it completely. They know exactly what, you know, where, how to sell, and what they're catering for, who they are, what the market wants, and all the rest of it. And I think that's, you know, again, it's similar to that thing that we were saying at the very beginning about the business side of art. For them to understand why somebody would want what it is they've got, you know, it's quite a difficult thing, I think, for artists. So what sort of examples have you got of people that you think, oh, you know, this person, because of the stuff that they're doing, has gone from this up that ladder to that? Is there any examples?
Yeah, no, I do. I do. Artists from suburbs of Johannesburg, never traveled. Yet the first time he took the plane was to come to our festival in Cape Town, which is a 2-hour flight, and did a beautiful mural. And from there, secured another job in Cape Town, and then from there moved to the center of Joburg. And then from there, we went together to New York. And then from there, worked for Apple Music with us for 3 years. And
wow.
and then started to get published in international publications. And for me, he has the talent, he has the uniqueness, and he managed to climb that ladder regularly every year. I hope it continues.
Yes.
But it can be scary as well at some time, because suddenly you're exposed to the international scene, and I'm sure it must happen with musicians as well.
Oh God, yes, absolutely.
You get into cultures that you had no clue that existed, and so there's that element of like, do I want to pursue this, or do I want to stay local? And there's a conscious choice to make there, which I think can be tough for certain people.
That's very interesting you saying that, because I tell you a story about somebody that there was a lad that I taught from about the age of 8, and he seemed to be in the right place at the right time. Let's just put it that way. So when I first met him, he was singing. You know, I started teaching, but he was singing in a school choir, and the school choir won an award for the in a competition. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. You know, that's good. And then this lad, when he's been playing a few years, he's in a band. He's about 13 or 14. They enter a competition, sort of local battle of the bands sort of thing, and they win it. And they beat some bands who are like, you know, who are sort of 18, 20 years of age. And I thought, okay, this is really good. He then goes to the Brit School in in the UK. And he and a friend, they've got this sort of guitar and violin thing. So they're doing this sort of gypsy jazz thing. They won a load of awards at the school, and then they were offered sort of like a recording thing, and they made connections with people like Michael Parkinson, who's a famous interviewer, was in this country. But then this lad, he had this project that we were trying to do, and he phoned me up one day and he said, "Look, I've met a friend of mine at college, and she's an urban soul singer, and I want to give this a little bit of a, give it a go and see. And if that's okay, we'll put this thing on the back burner. If that's okay." I went, "Yeah, of course." It's Anyway, this friend, the urban soul singer, was Adele. So the two of them, this is the sort of formulation of Adele's band. They go from just going out and doing a couple of gigs, just the two of them. And then on one day, I get in the car after I've been teaching on a Saturday and turn the radio on, and there's this guy playing guitar. And I thought, "Oh God, this sounds like me." Because they had all these sort of like licks and things. I thought, "Can't be, surely, that's Ben." And she was on BBC Radio 2, and it was just him and Adele. And then that evening, they were on Jonathan Ross's programme on BBC TV. So in one day. And then they were literally catapulted into, so the band started touring and everything. And he's still with her. So he's in Las Vegas. But the thing that I thought was really fascinating about this was how, particularly Adele, obviously, dealt with the psychological aspect of going from nothing to extreme international stardom in no time at all. Mm-hmm. And she is incredibly organized, right from the very beginning. She was offered a series of record contracts, and she chose the smallest company.
Okay.
And because she could control what her output was, she wasn't going to be bullied. So that story you were saying about people, having to make a decision about where they want, how far up that ladder they want to go, I think is a really important aspect of the whole process of how you are creative and how you deal with when you get into the big world of whatever it is you're doing, and all the sort of politics within that world. I mean, that's such a difficult thing for people to deal with from nothing, because it's difficult for people to be advised, isn't it, until you're there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But I do think, again, if we look at averages and statistics, not so many people are catapulted overnight.
No, absolutely.
In music or visual arts,
absolutely,
it takes a decade, sometimes two, or some three. So on average, you can prepare yourself, and you can take, I'm not going to call them baby steps, but you can take your steps at your time and set your target. And then I think it's not often that you have someone like Adele gets.
No, but it does happen. Occasionally it does happen.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah,
and
it does happen.
When it happens, you get, obviously, some people, there's obviously a lot of classic cases that you can point to and go, they just weren't ready to deal with that enormity of what was going on, And I think what you're saying about, you were saying that people can choose a level that they want to go to and think, right, okay, I'm okay there, before they sort of push on to something else, Yeah, I think that's really important and really interesting as well. I don't know if anybody's done any. Somebody must have researched.
Well, we can continue to develop the ladder. I read about the ladder 2-3 years ago, but it was not a fully developed concept. But I kept on using it and referencing to it.
I think it's a really good concept.
And I do add stories to it.
Yeah.
But it tells you where you are and where you want to go and where you want to stop, or what's the road to summit if that's your target.
Yeah. I was thinking, because I did an interview with Billy Childish, who's a British artist, and he's sort of in the Medway towns, so that's sort of south of London, well, south and east of London, further out in Kent. And Bill is a sort of punk musician and artist, right? And he does the pieces are massive, that he does on big canvases and stuff. And he was painting and playing, producing music and everything for years and years and years. And obviously people knew him in the Medway towns, but some people in London, and because of the music, he was known in Europe and in the Far East, but only, very sort of culty sort of thing. And then he got, I think it was an exhibition. I'm not sure if it was a London exhibition or it was an exhibition in Europe that really sort of made his name. And now, obviously, he's really well known. But that, as you say, that was more of a slow burn. So by the time it came, I think he knew the scene really well, and maybe that's a good thing.
There's something you said also earlier that I think is part of that mix, is not to put all your eggs in the same basket. Because yes, you can paint, do music, teaching, and something else, and maybe you believe you're the best painter of all time, but your music might take off because it inspires people more.
Yes. And I think that's actually quite common, really. There's often people don't get. They'll think that certain things that they do are really good, but the things that really make them is the thing that they didn't think was particularly good. I mean, that happens a lot with musicians, where the song that really makes them, they virtually sort of thought was just rubbish. I mean, you could reel off loads of examples of that. Yeah, there's loads of examples of that from, Billy Joel's "Just the Way You Are." They thought it was. None of the band liked it. It was
I would push any artist to experiment with different mediums and different artwork types or technology types, because you don't know where it's going to come from.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. That sometimes your focus isn't necessarily where the public.
You can still follow your passion. I mean.
Oh yeah. Of course.
Art or painting is your passion. You can still follow it, but you don't know which line of, let's call them line of business. It's going to be a very businessy podcast, I think, but it's okay.
No, it's good. No, and I do think actually it's something that's really, really important. Definitely. Yeah.
But for us, it has been always like the sustainability and how can a business in the art industry can be sustainable, and how to maintain it, and what are the avenues, and not be scared to be innovative, like looking one side or the other and try out. If we want to use an analogy, there's research and development in big laboratory. Yeah. Well, we can apply that to art, research and development. It's normal. It's normal to experiment. It's normal to push boundaries. It's actually necessary, I believe, in the art sector to push boundaries.
Definitely. Cool stuff. Well, we've been talking for nearly an hour. That was brilliant. There's so many things that you're talking about that really, like we're saying about sort of the whole idea of how you finance things, or find a market for what you're doing, and also that having a way of looking at. I think particularly because you're coming from the sort of world of sort of finance and business, coming to the world of art, particularly like street art, I think there's something that sometimes is a tricky thing to do, to come and look at something afresh as an artist. And I think that's really important. And certain artists can do that. They can reinvent themselves and see things differently.
Yeah,
but it's actually quite difficult, I think.
I don't know. I can tell you where it comes from. It's going to take us on another topic. But,
Go on
then. So in my finance career, I was working in a construction company that brought me closer to architecture, really. I was the financial manager of a construction company in Kigali, in Rwanda. So right in the center of the African continent. And I was basically the only expat that was not working for an NGO.
Right.
Out of all my friends I met there, everybody was working for NGOs. And obviously we had very heated debates at night over a couple of beers and some brochettes on a barbecue. And one of the recurrent topics that I could see during my few years in Rwanda was that the construction company has been established for 15 years and employ 500 people on different projects around the country, and upskilling people from basically no skill to put blocks together, to make cement, to paint, to install windows. And on the NGO side, I could see NGO appearing and disappearing every day.
Yeah.
Depending on funding, and funding had nothing to do with the employees, nothing to do with the issue they were dealing. It was purely coming from an external sources decided at international level. And I don't know if you're dealing with HIV, I can tell you there's still HIV in Rwanda. Funding has changed drastically over the years, up and down. But when it's down, you have to fire everybody. So,
yes.
So for me, there was that problem, like you cannot just rely on funding if you want to solve a problem. You have to create some sort of a service or a commercial transaction. You have to provide something that will benefit someone. If you want to be able to sell your work or your artwork in this case. So when I first started the street art festival and the street art platform, was how can I create something that is self-sustainable and does not rely too much on funding?
I can see that point now, because you said this right.
We do receive funding, I'm not gonna lie, but if it disappears tomorrow,
it
doesn't set up in a way that we should not disappear, and we can continue to provide jobs to artists. And for me, it's a big topic, and I can see how music is more advanced, all the film industry as well. I do think animation is on track. I don't know if we can consider gaming as art, but I mean, there's definitely a lot of creativity in gaming. And gastronomy, if we take gastronomy as a form of art, but there are others. Definitely street art was part of it. That needs that bit of inspiration to get that that sustainability. Yeah.
No, that's really good. I think I get that now when you're saying about funding. If you could do something that doesn't need the funding, great if you can get it, but it's not completely dependent upon it. Because otherwise, as you say, just stops. And obviously we don't. Being in the UK, we don't see the NGO type activity as you would in somewhere, like Africa or something, where, we sort of hear of it here, and it seems like there's a lot of money going somewhere. And does it actually do what it needs to do? Or is it just, are there a lot of people out there just, is it going to the people that really need it? Because I don't have no idea.
Yes, it does. Again, on average, using statistics, of course, there are a few scammers out there. I do think it does. Last week, for example, there was, so obviously we are post-COVID, so there's all those stimulus and package that are unleashed by the government to reactivate, well, in this case, art and culture, because that's what we're speaking about. And I was part of the panel judge who adjudicates the application of who receives money or not, in terms of art and culture and job creation in the art and culture sector. And it's a panel of 6 people that decides on applications. And as you go through them, you feel responsible of granting money to people that are actually going to make a difference. And it happened quite a few times where we were reading an application and the 6 of us said, that's a scam. We're not even going to consider that. There's nothing that looks legit. And so there's that, I do think, and that's probably great why there was 6 people judging and not 1. Yeah, there's that consensus and that sense of responsibility of saying like, well, let's make a difference. But what I can tell you is that funding is going to be for 2 years, and after 2 years, if you're not sustainable, well, that's your own problem, because
yes,
I don't think the government will reissue that.
No, exactly. Brilliant stuff. Well, Alex, wonderful. So wishing you all the best with what you're doing. I mean, I love the picture in the back.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's brilliant. So I'll put some things in the show notes. If I think I got a link, but if you've got anything else that you can send me, I'll put some stuff in so people can find out a little bit about what you're doing. All right.
Sure. Yeah. Link to the website, for example.
Yeah. That'd be cool. Yeah. That'd be really good.
Baz-Art.co.za with a hyphen in the middle.
Yeah.
Certain. Can send you a few pictures and a few videos.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Yeah, that'd be
videos
great.
Of everything.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be really good. Excellent stuff. Anyway, so that's wonderful. Thanks ever so much for joining me.
Thank you, Vic.
Enjoyed that chat very much. Thank you.
With pleasure.